Nothing is more corrosive or toxic to contentment than comparison.
Welcome back to Raising G-Rated Kids. My name is Kevin Thompson. I'm with Ray Johnston and Mark Clark. We are looking at 7 storms hitting today's kids. And in the last session, Pastor Ray looked at the impact of mainstream media. And in this session, guys, we're going to talk about social media.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just tweeting.
So what is the impact of social media on today's kids? It's nothing but positive, right?
Nothing but positive. We've been engaged with you the whole time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I've been reading a book. So here's a resource for you guys, The Coddling of the American Mind. And I don't say that offensively as a non-American. I think it's true about all Westerners.
Canadians have been coddled as well.
So there's a guy named Sean Parker, and he was like one of the main president of Facebook when it first started. He was a hacker long before they established Facebook. And here's one of the quotes he says. He says, that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content. And that's going to get you more likes and comments. It's a social validation feedback loop. Exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
Wow.
Okay, so this is what social media is trying to do. Poke your brain, give you a dopamine hit. It's what addiction is, literally. I mean, you give cocaine or Coca-Cola or whatever to rats. They come back for the hit, And then earlier in the interview, he says these haunting words. He asked this question, God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains.
Wow.
So this is the question. So I have some data on a couple things it's doing to our children's brains, which is, of course, what we're talking about.
So it's not that God only knows. We are actually starting to figure it out.
We are starting to figure this stuff out because, social media basically gets invented, 2007, 8, somewhere along those lines, after iPhone comes out, 2006. So a few things. Depression is being found, clinical legitimate depression is being found in about 1/5 of teenage to adolescent girls right now.
So 20% of adolescent girls are clinically depressed.
Or feeling clinically depressed, yes. Since 2000, suicide among the same age girls has actually doubled. Non-fatal self-injury has increased in massive amounts. Of course, fear of missing out has become because we're massively social creatures, of course, and so massive levels. And then there's been an increase of 150% since 2010 of college students that are deemed having a psychological disorder. 150% increase since 2010. So that's some of the stuff among a million different, and all those stats are not like made up. They're like in a book where legitimate psychological work has been done. So that's what we're facing.
Yeah, when it comes to social media, I mean, there are multiple things that are going on, but one of the primary things I think that's going on is it puts such an emphasis on the image, on the surface.
Sure.
Whereas for Christian parents, our concern is supposed to be the heart. To where now we become more concerned. It's the difference between plastic surgery and whereas Jesus was a cardiologist, right?
Yeah.
And we put such an emphasis now on the persona, what I project, and not the actual soul. And I think what happens in part is we are looking at what everybody else is projecting in the most positive, airbrushed possible light, and we know deep in our hearts that's not us,
right?
And the strain that now comes from that. And I think, we're just now talking about the storm, but I think one of the strategies that we have to look at as a parent is we have to be fixated on the heart, on the heart of our children. But if we're not very careful, we actually become more concerned with the image.
Yeah.
And so, child's throwing a temper tantrum in the supermarket, I'm more concerned with what everybody else thinks about me as a parent.
As you should be.
Actually,
I'd be silently judging you if your child was
what is most needed for the child in the moment. And so this isn't just a storm that's hitting kids. This is a storm that's hitting parents equally as much.
I also think, I talk about in marriage, for instance, if you're scrolling Instagram and you're constantly comparing your spouse to every other woman out there or every other man out there, what you're beginning to do is corrode your contentment level. And so nothing is more corrosive or toxic to contentment than comparison. And so what you're doing constantly is you're just in this, they call it the paralysis of choice. And it was basically, 60 years ago, you'd go to the supermarket and you have 3 different tomato sauces to choose from. But now you have every tomato sauce under the sun to choose from. You don't know what to do. Well, back in the day, you would marry one of the 4 girls in your village that wasn't your sister.
Yeah.
Right? And now you could date a billion literally a billion. You just have to pick up your phone and go, like I've sat at, at card tables with guys hanging out and they'll be, they're single. So they're on Christian dating apps and they're just swiping. We're like, no. It's like, what? How do you ever make a choice? The paralysis of choice. And the corrosive nature of, I'm never going to be content because look at that one and look at him and look at her and look at the isolating factor of what that must do. Forget a 40-year-old brain. Yeah. What happens when you're 16, 11, 13?
Well, now, the paralysis of choice thing, that's Brian.
Yeah.
We should have put a slide up about that. Just write it on your whatever you're watching this on.
Sure. Yeah.
The process of choice, when you do a study on what's happened in just general culture, okay, and all these futurists, they all agree on one thing. They disagree on everything, but they agree on one thing. Okay, the pace of change is accelerating.
Yes.
Like what took 30 years now takes 3.
Yes.
And they were basically saying, if your head is spinning already because of the pace of change, they said, you just wait. We're going to have more change in the next 3 years than the last 100. Okay, and so you go, what are the negatives of that? It's exactly this. It is you're unable to make a choice. I mean, you think about it, you go to buy some electronic equipment. Okay, the minute you buy it, get it out, put it in your car. When is it out of date?
Right.
On your drive home.
Right.
Which means we are raising a generation that knows that any commitment they make, they're going to regret.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to get them to make commitments to character, commitments to faith, commitments to each other, and they can't decide whether or not to buy a phone.
Yeah, and beyond all that, I mean, we have to then admit what's going on behind the scenes. These social media companies now are not designed for our good. They're designed to make money off of us.
Yeah.
And so the algorithms will do whatever it takes to make us keep scrolling. And you and I do not keep scrolling whenever we agree with something, whenever it's something that matches kind of what we believe in. Instead, it begins to exploit our greatest weaknesses and insecurities and drives us down these rabbit holes to ensure that we're going to keep scrolling, keep spending time so they can keep on spending advertising dollars. And it's interesting. We do kind of know what's going on in our brains now. Dan Siegel, the psychiatrist at UCLA, that talks about the neurons that fire together, wire together. So it is this concept that our brains are literally being reshaped by where we are placing our attention, and these social media companies are making their money off of our attention, which is taking us off of the things that really do matter and onto these things that literally are going to drive us crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple more stats here. 4 billion people total are on social media across different platforms. The average person is on about 7 different social media platforms. The average person goes on social media about 95 minutes per day, but that's low for depending on the age. So that's just the average age. TikTok is the fastest growing social media. And this is the thing, to come back to your thing about the heart. I don't think we're ever going to be able to keep up. If our approach to like pastoring and shepherding our kids in this moment is like, we got to block them and keep them and guard them and all that. Obviously, there needs to be some of that. And I'll talk about what I think the solution is in a second. But we're never going to be able to keep up. I mean, most of the parents out there don't even know the apps because like the 14 or 15, that age group, if they want to go on some perverse app that shows crazy stuff or whatever, it's buried. It looks like a calculator. You can't even search your kid's phone. Like these things are buried within buried within buried. Most people our age are like, are you on Facebook? They're like, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't care. I'm on some weird app down here that was developed in something. We couldn't chase it down if we tried. And so
that's
does
the
come
idea
back.
that Ray's talking about. We're not. The old way of parenting is to prepare the app for the child.
Exactly.
Now we're trying to prepare the child for whatever app they're on.
That's smart.
Yeah, that's really good. So I do have a suggestion. So there was this, in the midst of all the psychological study that was done, they literally come up with a practical suggestion with us instead of just being like, oh no, what are we going to do? And I think this is just super practical. It says, the primary cause of the increase in mental illness is frequent use of smartphones and other electronic devices, but less than 2 hours a day seems to have no deleterious effects. But adolescents who spend several hours a day interacting with screens, particularly if they start in their early teens or younger, have worse mental health outcomes than do adolescents who don't. So I think one practical thing is we could go, The solution is not to go, I mean, I have 3 teenage girls. The solution is not to go, you're not allowed on Instagram. I mean, you can go that extreme, but I don't think that's a good shepherding of the heart. Why don't we go 2 hours a day of social media, or 2 hours a day you get to be, and you can track it. You can literally have on their phone how much, and it's 2 hours every day, and they seem to say that's the little point, right? Where it's like more than 2 hours, you start to get into some of the mental effects. Less than 2 hours, they couldn't track whether it had terribly negative effects. So I think that's a good practical goal.
Can I critique that in one way?
No.
So
that's the episode, guys. Be here for the next episode.
Here's the challenge. I think everybody listening and watching pays attention to that.
Yeah.
Here's what they're not willing to do. The parents are not willing to abide by that.
Themselves as examples. Yes.
So I cannot ask my child, you can only have 2 hours, and I'm over here for 5 or 6 hours.
100%.
And I think it's the unwillingness of the parent to actually detach from social media, which is the greatest threat to the child. And so the question is, are we willing to make that commitment?
Yeah, that's really good.
We did. You guys are there. We run these huge camps for teenagers, middle school, junior high, high school. We do a thing in Mexico every year, and in Mexico, we'll have 600 to 1,000 teenagers there, depending on the year. Build homes, huge base camp. It's a week. Okay, send them the minute they get there. We take their phone, log it, put it in the bag, take it. Phone's gone. Okay, you're like they're prying it out of their outstretched arms. Okay, last week we found out a few parents sent a second phone and teaching their kid to do things, to break rules.
Yeah.
So when they break their mom and dad's rules, you train them. Okay, but it was interesting. I got to camp day 2. I pull in. Normally, you'll have 1,000 teenagers all like this sitting on a bench. No, they couldn't do that. I walked in and they went, about 50 of them had invented a volleyball game. Mm-hmm. And I went, good Lord, actual kids outside inventing games. Yeah. Everybody's talking to each other. And at the end, when you evaluate this, they're like, best thing was taking my phone away. Mm-hmm. They somehow, they knew it was good for them. Mm-hmm. And I love your 2-hour idea or something, but just setting some standards on that, okay?
Yeah.
The last thing is this, okay? If the cat's already out of the bag, they're already on all that kind of stuff, what do you do to at least counteract some of the effects?
I think it begins with the basic concept that fear will drive me to valuing image. Love compels me to value heart. And so I think in every aspect of who we are as a family, that I have to be driving things back to the heart of who we are. Transparency, confessing our own struggle in an age-appropriate way, and then even challenging our students if they're old enough. Hey, I struggle with this too. Why don't we do this together? But if we do not do that, then our family, our culture, our kids will become solely about the image. And we'll be whitewashed tombs, like Jesus said, and literally dead on the inside.
Yep. Here's, to your point, Ray, here's a quote from one of the psychologists. It is worth remembering that humans' neural architecture actually developed under conditions of close, mostly continuous face-to-face contact with others, including non-visual and non-auditory contact, i.e. touch, and that a decrease in or removal of a system's key inputs may risk destabilization of the system. So basically, if we remove, interacting on social media is fine. Because we're ultra social creatures. That's how God made us. We have to be in interaction with it. But the lack of the face-to-face, the ability to touch and to feel, will create such a psychological isolation that, of course, depression is going to happen. And so somehow, aside from coupled with the 2-hour rule, maybe there has to be, to your point, a replacement of it. You can't just remove an idol. You have to replace it with something that you love more, right? And so you can't just say don't be on social and then not give them the replacement of. And not to sound like the Cleavers here, you got to replace it with Scrabble and life together and face-to-face dad and mom and sisters and brothers, if that's your situation, as much as you can. And that's the challenge. parents are so tired. It's like, hey, don't be on social, but then they're on social. So I think you got to replace it with the actual physical face-to-face contact.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd say three things. Like when I think about our 4 kids, okay, we did 3 things, okay, whether it helped or not. One of my daughters is here. I would say 3 steps. Number 1, start them late on a phone, okay, or whatever you're going to do. Just start them late. Like our kids are coming home. We need phones. Everybody's got them. I went, you're 4. No. And then I think they finally got a flip phone,
right.
With no ability to get anything when they turn 30. So start them late, okay? Second one was take it away during any social time, okay? Like I would drive them to school. I'd go, look, I'm not driving you to school if you're on your phone. Let's have a conversation. We go to a restaurant. Phones away. Sometimes they'd have friends over, and I would go, all right, you guys are here to watch whatever. Okay, everybody's phones in the basket. Okay?
Right.
You can't do that. You just when it's appropriate, when it isn't.
That's good.
And then the third one is exactly what you just said, which is match the impact. In other words, they're going to be shaped by high impact people, high impact experiences, and high impact events. Just
really
make
good.
sure what you're doing isn't primarily negative.
Yes.
If you're going, we're going to set some limits on the phone, match it with some great stuff you're doing.
Yeah, and to your point about the first one, do it young. I'm watching parents make the mistake of naively, and I don't know if it's just tiredness. They're letting all our kids, phones are out here. You go up to your bedroom. They're never up in your bedroom. You're not going to. We know parents that it's like the kid's sitting there at midnight by himself on an iPad, and he's like 15 years old, and you're like, what do you think he's doing at midnight? Oh, he's just playing Minecraft. It's like, yeah, I bet he is. It's like you're so naive, but the parents are too late. It's like create that system where they're downstairs, they all of those little distinctions. So, okay.
That's exactly right. You guys wrap this up. I got to go.
Okay, yeah.
7 storms hitting every kid. There's no question that social media is one of those, but it's not the only one. We'll see you next time.